If you love flowers, then flower farming might be a good homestead income option for you. Jessica from White Willow Farm Ohio shares why she chose flower farming as an income source and gives you tips on how you can start your own flower farm. This is episode 28 of the Homesteading for Beginners podcast. This is the Homesteading for Beginners podcast, and I'm Mona Weathers, your homesteading mentor and coach. If you desire to establish a solid foundation for your homesteading journey, then you are in the right place. I'm here to show you how in a way that is healthy for you, your family, and your community. I'll share stories from the past 20 years of my own journey and offer you actionable steps you can take to start and maintain a healthy homestead. Today is episode 28, and it's the third part of a 4-part series I'm doing on homestead income. I hope you're enjoying this series. It's been really great to be able to interview these guests and learn from them about how they generate an income through their homesteading, because of their homesteading. There's so many ways to generate an income, and I just want to encourage you to kind of think outside the box sometimes and just think of the things that you can do and stick with it. So Jessica's going to share some of her knowledge and tips and experience. Don't forget the free 101 Homestead Income Ideas list is now available for you to download. I've compiled a list of 101 income ideas and divided them into the 3 income streams: on homestead, off homestead, and online income. This resource is completely free and will prepare you for a free training I have coming up called the free 2-week Homestead Income Digital Product Workshop. I have this training is coming up at the end of February 22nd. And during the training, I'll be helping you discover a digital product you can create and sell to your ideal customer. So grab your freebie today by going to healthyhomesteading.com/homestead income. Or if you want to just register for the free 2-week workshop, you can follow the link in the show notes. Okay, welcome back. This is another episode of the Homesteading for Beginners podcast, and we're going to talk about Homestead Income series that we've been doing. And we're here with my friend Jessica White of White Willow Farm, Ohio, and she is going to share with us how she does her flower farm, how flower farming is a income source for her. And so let's get started. Actually, before we get started, I'm going to share. I didn't meet her on Instagram. I like some of the past interviews that I did. I met her on Clubhouse, and this was I think 2021 possibly. And we have been just staying connected, and we've been growing our friendship, and it's just like the online community can be a very strong source of community. So just remember that as you're reaching out to people, that you could have lifelong friends. But Jessica's going to share her flower farm, how she has started that. And so, hi, Jessica.
Hi, Mona. Thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We talk almost like every day, so this
We
is just we
do.
might get a little silly. There's a possibility.
It is a strong possibility. Very much so.
Okay, so for our listeners, tell us about a little bit about yourself, your background, and how long you've been homesteading.
Sure. So, my name is Jessica White. I am a homesteader and flower farmer in Northwest Ohio. You can find me on Instagram at White Willow Farm Ohio and a couple other places. But I have been homesteading my entire life. I was born and raised on a farm. Generation upon generation of my family have all been farmers. My parents farmed, my grandparents farmed. My mom's parents actually had a dairy farm, and that was a great experience growing up. Once I graduated high school, I left, got an art degree, fell in love with colors and design, got married, had kids, moved back to my hometown, and moved into this really, really old homestead. I mean, when I say really old, I mean really old for Ohio. I know there are a lot of other places around the United States and around the world that are probably a lot older than our old house, but it was built in the 1900s, and it really inspired me to start our homestead there.
So you got back into the farm life and the homestead life after you had your kids, and what ended what how what where was the transition to flowers? Like what brought flower farming or even just growing flowers into your life?
Oh, right. So the homesteading thing has kind of always been a part of me. I got to the point where I had convinced my husband that we needed to grow our own food. So we were doing that for us and our family. But I had noticed in our past house we moved into the house in 2019. And I had noticed in the spring of 2020 the large amount of flowers that were all over the property. There were tons of perennials like peonies and really fancy daffodils, tulips, the works. There were flowers everywhere. And while doing more research on our house, which I encourage everybody to do, I love finding out the history of a place. It turns out that for 100 years, the same family had owned the house that we lived in. It had just been passed down from generation to generation, which so cool. And the last lady of that family that lived there loved flowers. And she did a masterful job at interplanting flowers. All the bulbs are layered up in the ground. It was beautiful. And it inspired me not only to grow more flowers. I mean, I've loved flowers forever. My husband really enjoys flowers, but it encouraged me to use these as cut flowers. I was bringing them into the house over the spring, and I thought, I want to share these with other people. So that's kind of what inspired me to start looking into flower farming. So I spent all of 2020 doing research on flower farming, and 2021 was my first year in business.
That's awesome. I don't think I actually heard that full story. So I learned something new. I didn't realize the previous owner had planted a bunch of flowers. That's actually right now we moved to this property in Georgia, and I was so so excited to see all the flowers that came up this spring. We moved in August, so everything had pretty much, was on the dying end. Um, I didn't know there was a woods full of tulips. So it's so nice. Like if you do anything for the future owners of your home, plant bulbs somewhere so that they can be surprised when they come up, right?
Yes. Oh my goodness. It is the best feeling to move into a house and then just see the beautiful life spring up. I know it sounds fantastical,
Mm.
but it really is that awesome feeling. Like, oh my goodness, it's just so pretty.
Yes. And, one of the other things that, they had planted here were lots of zinnias because a lot of zinnia, they reseeded and came up, and I found all these zinnias, and my one of my grandkids is named Zinnia, so it was so special to me. Like, that year I found out, she was just brand new and all these zinnias were out on my property, and it just was so special. I love flowers. Like, I don't really I haven't talked about flowers here on this, podcast very much, but I really love flowers. I love how they make me feel. I love the variety, and I'd love to include more flowers. So, in your opinion, what is the most difficult part about growing flowers, though? Because I like to ask this question because I want to make sure people understand the hardship that might come with with a thing. So, what's the most difficult part about growing flowers?
Okay, so I am going to give you 2 to 3 different answers. I know. Number one is what a lot of people think is hard when they first start flower farming, and that is starting things from seed. Seed saves you money rather than having to buy little plugs of already started plants. It's a lot cheaper to just buy your own seed and start the seed. And if you're starting out in flower farming, that's going to sound like the worst thing ever, and it's going to be a pain in the rear to do. It's not. um, and then for people looking in at the flower farming, they're thinking that growing the flowers is the hardest. It's the hardest thing to make sure that you're keeping up on water and fertilization. But for those people out there that are actually flower farmers right now, they know the hardest thing to do is harvest. I'm not going to
Mm.
lie. When it comes to growing the actual flowers, the hardest thing to do is harvest. Everything
Mhm.
has its own special harvest time. Some things have to be fully open, some things have to be fully closed. Some spikes have to be a third of the way open. Everything has their own way to like pick them at the peak of bloom. And it is one of the hardest things that I've had to wrap my mind around. I actually have a lot of the things that I harvest written down when is the best time to harvest them. I'm working on some sort of system, maybe a laminated paper out in front of the row,
Mm.
just so it's easy to remember. But that is one of the hardest things when it comes to growing cut flowers.
Mm. That that is that I could see that. I never really thought about it as far as like I'm just a hobby, flower. I just grow flowers for myself, but I didn't think about like how difficult it would be to get to make sure that those were the right times to pick the flowers. So I think I kind of forgot to ask you the question. What transitioned you from seeing those flowers and then selling those flowers that you had on the property, existing property?
Oh, one of the main things for me was definitely just enjoying the flowers, number one, for myself, you know? I would gift them to friends, and I saw the joy that it brought them. I knew that at some point I would need to make some sort of income. I'd been a stay-at-home mom, and I actually, surprisingly enough, used to be a face painter previous to
Mm,
COVID, and then COVID hit, and face painting got a lot harder. So
mm,
I put my paintbrushes away, but my love of color and shape and form was still there. And it just sprung at me with flowers at this new place. And I thought,
mm,
there's something there. I really want to share the joy of the flowers that I have on my property with others. And it actually, 2020 and 2021 was the time that everyone was growing gardens.
mhm,
And there was this huge uptick in flower farming. People have finally started to hear about it. I believe that's when Florette started their, I believe in 2021, Florette started their television series, which I think
mm,
helped a lot for flower farming. But I had just heard about it in little trickles, and it just piqued my interest, knowing that there were already in the rural community I'm in, there are already homesteaders and farmers of all different kinds that sell eggs and meat. And I hadn't
mm,
really heard of a lot of flower farmers. So I had the flowers, I wanted to share them, and it just kind of fell into my lap in just
mm.
all the right ways.
Yeah, it really did. Like that just sounds like the perfect scenario if you're going to get into a business like just drop you with all these flowers to start.
Exactly.
So how do you currently or I know you're in transitions with your house, but what's the way you generate this income with the flowers like you make bouquets and that kind of thing?
Yes. So previously, for those of you that don't know, we have recently moved. So I had to move a ton of perennials to our new house and basically start over because we had to take a year off of selling flowers, which was hard, but worth it, I will say.
Mhm.
So at the previous house, I was just getting started. So I would sell bouquets just from my home via Facebook. I would post when I had a couple bouquets. I would also I also had a CSA, and I had 4 members of that CSA for my very first year, and they would get bouquets every other week. So that was one thing that I did. But now this year, currently, I am working on a farm stand for the front of our property. The house that we moved to is just down the road from a golf course, and I am going to take full advantage of that by having a farm stand and allowing people to stop at our property to visit the farm stand. I also have CSAs, which, for those of you that don't know, is community supported agriculture. It's like a subscription where people pay ahead of time to be a part of that CSA, and then they get their bouquets on a regular basis. So it's like a subscription. I just don't like using the word subscription. I like to
Yeah.
keep it very agriculture based.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm glad you mentioned the name because I was gonna ask you, like, make sure you tell them what that stands for because I couldn't remember. I was like,
Yes,
"Yeah, what does it stand for?"
community supported agriculture.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful concept, and honestly, I do add the word subscription after it just so people can grasp what it is,
Mhm.
but it is not a subscription. I feel like a subscription is something you pay for monthly or yearly to keep that going on, whereas mine is a pay once, get your certain amount of weeks of whatever, and thank you for investing in my business.
Mhm.
So that's why I try to use the word community supported agriculture, just
Mhm.
because a lot of vegetable farmers use it. And I think more flower farmers should if that's what they're doing. We will also be looking into having classes,
Mm.
little bouquet bars. It's something that recently a lot of my previous customers and friends and family in the area are actually asking about. I did put a little bit of a question out there on my Instagram asking how else people would like to see my flowers. How else would
Mhm.
they like to buy them other than my farm stand? And I think that was the best thing I could have done because
Mhm.
I've already reached out to multiple businesses to see if I can go ahead and have some sort of bouquet class or
Mhm.
a bouquet bar. A bouquet bar is basically when I have all of my stems in different buckets and I charge per stem and they come in and build their own bouquets.
Mm.
That way I don't have to make the bouquets and they don't have to pick the flowers.
I would totally be there if we lived close. Jessica's in Ohio and I'm in Georgia. One day we'll meet in person, um, but I would totally be there. That sounds like so much fun. Um, so what advice would you give someone that's just starting out with flower farming or thinking about it?
The first thing I would say is start small. Even though this is my second/third year, I am still restarting rather small. You
Mhm.
want to start smaller just so you can size up appropriately, make sure that it's for you. Um, I would not invest in perennials your first year. Like, don't
Mm,
go out and buy all the peonies. Don't do
mhm,
it. Not your first year. Wait until your second or third. Make sure that this is something you really want to do because once you start buying perennials, you're investing a lot of money and time
mhm,
into your flower business.
mm. I have this deep desire to have lots of peonies. How do you say it?
Peony.
Peonies? Yeah, like,
Some
I
people
love
say peony, some people say peony.
okay. I love that flower. I am, like, in love with that flower. Um, I did get some dahlias planted a couple years ago, but I just love the peonies. Um, but I wanna ask you, because I think this is kind of our last question, but I wanna ask you what your favorite flower is.
Whatever flower I'm growing at the time.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
no, that is actually a cliche flower farmer answer for a reason.
Mm.
Um, there are so many beautiful flowers,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna have to go with the one that's been my favorite since childhood, which is the sunflower.
Mm.
And that's actually something I have learned from other flower farmers. If you really want to make a go of flower farming, but you don't want to grow all the flowers, just grow sunflowers.
Mm.
Everyone
That's
loves a good sunflower.
yes, sunflowers are and there's so many different there's so
Oh
many
my
different
goodness.
varieties, like yeah, I love sunflowers too. Those were just so much fun. I have some old photos of some of the sunflowers I grew in California, and they're towering over us, and they're just those big giant ones.
Oh
What are
yeah.
those mammoth sunflowers? Yeah,
Yes.
flowers just make you happy, and they make pollinators happy, not just honeybees, but all pollinators love flowers. So
Yes.
plant lots of flowers if you're gonna have a garden
Oh, yeah.
because you will not have any pollination problems.
Exactly. That is the one thing that I've noticed, and even I've noticed the bees at our last house, but the one thing that I had noticed in my zinnias, I would walk down my zinnia field. I had 3 rows of zinnias, just like 50 feet long, filled. It was one of
Mhm,
my favorite places to walk around, and
mm,
there would just be an enormous amount of butterflies, and
mm,
it was just one of those peaceful moments, walking through the zinnias, watching the butterflies. It's
mhm.
the thing that you see on Instagram, and I believe it's the only flower that actually resembles what people post on Instagram when it comes to flower farming. We as a flower farmer, the normal saying goes, if your garden is beautiful, you're not doing your job right. Most of the flowers that need to be cut and sold need to be cut and sold before they're open all the way.
Mm,
Zinnias need to be open all the way and have a strong stem. So those are the ones that I enjoy the most.
mm,
I do love dahlias. I wish we could overwinter them. I've been putting off having a lot of them because I have to dig them up every year.
mm.
And that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It is, and, they're very fussy, and I tend to not like fussy flowers.
Mm,
But I'm
yeah,
gonna try them. 'Em, they're too beautiful not to grow.
yeah. They are very, very beautiful. Okay, well, this was some really great information, and I know a lot of new homesteaders, there's always what do I start with first? How can I grow an go start an income? This would be an on homestead and off homestead income depending on where you're selling your items, but, flowers is kind of it's not easy, as Jessica was saying, but it's kind of a one that you don't have to worry about, maybe an animal dying.
Yes.
There's benefits to the fact that it's not an animal.
Oh, yes, definitely. I will say I shed less tears when my zinnias die compared to one of my ducks, so
Right, exactly, yeah. So, also, Jessica will be starting a podcast, coming soon. It'll be called Busy Mom on the Homestead, and she has an Instagram page called Busy Mom on the Homestead. So, if you're a mom and you are busy, tell us a little bit about your podcasts coming and your Instagram account.
Of course. So my Instagram account is still pretty new because I have been posting everything on my White Willow Farm Ohio Instagram account. But I figured if I really wanted to make a go of my flower farm business, take it seriously, I need other people to take me seriously as well. So having all of my homestead content and mom content on there really wasn't doing what I needed my flower farm to do. So I started my own separate Instagram that is strictly just homesteading and being a busy mom. And I decided that, I feel like we need to have the conversation more about being busy and still wanting to homestead. I feel like every time that we get online, we talk about the slow paced life that homesteading offers us, or, the old fashioned lifestyle. And you can still homestead, have a microwave, send your kids to public school, and have
Mhm.
basketball practice 3 nights a week. You can
Right.
do all those
Mhm.
things. And I feel like it's not talked about enough. So
Mhm.
I really wanted to start a podcast where I invite on other moms who have homesteaded or been in the agriculture space and just lead busy lives. And we talk about really interesting subjects like 4-H with our kids. Um, what else are we talking about? Oh, healthy growing of food.
Mhm.
We're going to be talking about new homesteading and jumping in without really thinking,
Mhm. That's a good
and
one.
everything in between. And I'm really looking forward to getting to have those conversations with some really great women.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too, and I love that people that this is kind of the message, like, homesteading is a lifestyle. You make it fit the way you want it to fit. Homesteading is about being more self-sufficient and sustainable, and that can come out in many different ways.
Exactly.
We are not Ma and Pa Ingalls, so we are modern homesteaders. It looks totally different than the way it did in, the past. So let's let each other define what it means to them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier we can find you at White Willow Farm, Ohio. That's at White Willow Farm, Ohio on Instagram. I'll have all these in the show notes, so I'll have all your links in there. If anybody wants to check out what she's got going on and follow her busy mom on the Homestead account, so that you'll know when her podcast airs. But thank you so much, Jessica, for coming on and chatting with me. I really had a really great time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Okay, that's the end of this episode, and we will be back next week with another interview episode. And I hope you come back and listen to our guest next week. And don't forget to download the free 101 Homestead Income Ideas list to get started on finding your ideal homestead income stream.